We cannot destroy democracy under the pretext of rescuing it. We cannot tolerate impunity. Impunity would leave an open wound, a scar. But we also cannot tolerate a conviction without proof. A conviction without proof opens a wound that will never heal.
Now, the American President Donald Trump has called the trial to be nothing less than a witch hunt. Slapped a 50% tariff on many imports from Brazil as punishment and even sanctioned the justices presiding over the trial. Now, Justice Moraes, who is presiding over the trial, has vowed in response that the court will not bow down to internal or external threats and coercion. Now, political unrest has once again erupted on the streets of Tbilisi. The opposition and the ruling party have clashed outside the mayor's election headquarters. The clashes have come just weeks before the municipal elections that are scheduled across Georgia on the 4th of October. The rival political factions have traded punches on the streets, the government supporters, and hurled bottles towards opposition rally. Now, several protesters, in fact, broke through the police barricades, prompting the police to form a human chain to push back the crowd. Now, the country's main opposition parties have announced to boycott the upcoming elections. They've accused the Georgian Dream Party of derailing Georgia from its European path and pushing it back into the Russian orbit. The political turmoil has been brewing since last year's parliamentary elections, and the Georgian Dream claimed victory. But the opposition has declared the result to be illegitimate, alleging vote rigging with Moscow's help. Now, since then, protests have become a daily feature across the country, and Georgia now is heading towards another election with the question of legitimacy looming pretty large. It could further deepen the divide between the government and the opposition. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of our newscast. Stay tuned to WION.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
where darkness hides behind every corner, where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders, psychopaths who defy explanation, international war crimes, and millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Vielleicht nur aus dem Ausland.
Hello there, welcome back to WION World is One. We are glad you're watching. Thank you for joining us at this hour. Time now for Fine Print. I'm Eric Njoka. The headlines. Israel launches attack on Hamas leadership in Doha, conducting strikes on homes of several members of the Palestinian group. Qatar condemns attack, calling it flagrant violation of international laws. Saudi Crown Prince calls Israeli attack on Hamas in Qatar a criminal act, while United Nations chief calls Israel's strikes a flagrant violation of Doha's sovereignty. Nepal Army Chief General Ashok Raj to deliver an address to the nation as protests and unrest continue across the country. The army appeals for calm and restraint, urging citizens to protect historical, cultural and national assets. NDA nominee and Maharashtra Governor C.P. Radhakrishnan elected as 15th Vice President of India with a total of 452 votes, defeating INDIA Bloc's candidate Justice B. Sudarshan Reddy, who received 300 votes. Prime Minister Francois Bayrou submits his resignation to President Emmanuel Macron after France's parliament ousted the government, with the French leader under pressure to find a successor in a deepening political crisis. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, after talks with the EU sanctions envoy, says that the Trump administration is willing to take firm action on Russia over Ukraine, but asserts Europe's full cooperation is crucial.
And they are the biggest source of
Ethiopia inaugurates the continent's largest hydroelectric project in what Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed calls a great achievement for all black people, but it draws a protest to the United Nations from downstream nation Egypt. Explosions rocked Doha, sending plumes of smoke through the city. Israel says it was a strike against the top leadership of Hamas. The Hamas team was engaged in negotiations with other officials in the Qatari capital. Moments after the news of explosion in Doha came, the Israeli military announced that it has carried out attacks targeting Hamas leaders. In a statement, the IDF says that prior to the strike, steps were taken to minimize harm to uninvolved civilians, including the use of precision weaponry and additional intelligence information. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel initiated it, Israel conducted it, and Israel takes full responsibility. Qatar condemned the action as cowardly and called it a flagrant violation of international law. Qatar, which has been a key mediator in efforts to broker a truce in Gaza, says Israeli strikes targeted the homes of several members of Hamas's political bureau residing in the Gulf country, where the militant group's senior leadership is based. Israeli officials claim the strike was aimed at top Hamas leaders, including Khalil al-Hayya, its exiled Gaza chief and top negotiator. Two Hamas sources told Reuters that Hamas officials in the ceasefire negotiating team survived the attack. Today's strikes, Israel's first attack on the Western-backed Gulf state, come less than 2 weeks after Israel's armed forces chief vowed to target the group's leaders based abroad. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned Israel's strikes on Qatar, calling them a flagrant violation of Doha's sovereignty, whereas Saudi Crown Prince has termed Israeli attack on Hamas in Qatar a criminal act. The US Embassy says that it has seen reports of missile strikes occurring in Doha. The US Embassy has instituted a shelter-in-place order for their citizens in Doha. US citizens are advised to take shelter and monitor. Israel's far-right finance minister Bezalel Smotrich praised the targeting of Hamas leaders, including al-Hayya, its exiled Gaza chief and top negotiator. Most of Hamas's leadership in Gaza has been killed in the war that began on October 7, 2023, while the militant group's political leadership abroad has mostly been untouched. The US Embassy in Qatar told citizens to take shelter. Mr. Giorgio Cafiero is a professor at the Georgetown University and CEO Gulf State Analytics. He is now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Cafiero, thanks very much for your time. After this attack in Doha, what's the scope of the negotiations and the release of hostages? Have the stakes gone higher for Israel or for Hamas?
This attack today on Doha was an attack on the heart of the mediation efforts between Hamas and Israel. By waging this unprecedented military operation today, the Israelis killed the negotiations process. You know, one of the reasons why Qatar has served as an effective place for these negotiations and why the US and other countries have appreciated Qatar hosting Hamas's political leadership is because Doha provided the Hamas officials with secure grounds. This type of security would not be possible if a country, let's say, such as Lebanon or Iran, were to host the Hamas leadership. But today we have learned that even in Qatar, the Hamas officials are not safe. So this begs the question, if they're not safe in Qatar, what country which would take them in could provide them security? I don't think there's any country that could at this point, which would have the political will to do so. Again, I repeat, this is a huge development that marks the death of the negotiations.
Mr. Cafiero, the U.S. has not commented on the strike, even though Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says it was an independent decision and takes full responsibility. The strike happened when the talks were in progress on U.S. proposals. How do you think America will react in the long run?
That's a great question, and that's what we're trying to figure out right now. So the Israeli leadership, as you mentioned, stated that Israel carried out this operation independently, yet many experts seriously doubt that that's the case. Mindful of the U.S.'s role as Qatar's security guarantor, and again, I want to remind your viewers that U.S. CENTCOM's forward headquarters are based at the military base in Al Udeid, Qatar. So, for good reason, people are making the assumption that this attack only took place because the U.S. gave Israel permission. Not to say the U.S. was necessarily pleased with it or coordinated it. I don't know about that. But I think there's good reason to assume that this was done with a green light from the Trump administration. If that's the case, that gives not only Qatar, but all of the GCC members good reason to question whether or not there's any value to the United States as a security guarantor. And the geopolitical ramifications here are going to be huge going forward.
Mr. Cafiero, last